I never thought I'd see my father serve coffee to anyone. In our household, he was the king, and everyone else was there to serve him. My mother, my two younger brothers, and especially me, his oldest daughter, who could never do anything right. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Connecticut, I learned early on that my father had different expectations for his children. My brothers, Mark and Michael, could do no wrong. They were being prepared for success, while I was being prepared for reality. The reality, according to my father, was that I would eventually get married and become someone's wife. So while my brothers were encouraged to study business, engineering, and finance, I was constantly reminded that my place was in the kitchen. My academic achievements were treated as pleasant surprises rather than expected outcomes. When I graduated at the top of my high school class, my father's only comment was, "That's nice, Lisa, but don't let it distract you from learning practical skills." By practical skills, he meant cooking, cleaning, and serving, the trinity of what he believed made a woman valuable. Every weekend was a training ground for these essential life skills. While Mark and Michael played video games or went to basketball practice, I was expected to help my mother prepare elaborate family meals and clean up afterward. "Lisa, clean the table. Lisa, wash the dishes. Lisa, why isn't dinner ready yet?" These commands became the soundtrack of my teenage years, delivered in my father's authoritative tone that left no room for negotiation. Every family gathering followed the same script. My aunts, uncles, and cousins would sit around our large oak dining table, laughing and enjoying themselves, while I moved silently between the kitchen and dining room, serving and clearing plates. Occasionally, my Aunt Sarah would offer to help, but my father would wave her off. "Lisa needs to learn," he would say, as if serving others was the pinnacle of my potential education. My mother, a kindergarten teacher who had once dreamed of becoming a school principal, had long ago accepted her role in our family dynamic. She would give me apologetic glances as she sat at the table, but never challenged my father directly. Years later, she confessed that she had fought this battle early in their marriage and lost, deciding it was easier to comply than to constantly argue. I remember the day I received my college acceptance letters. I'd applied to several business schools, hoping to study marketing, a field that had fascinated me since I first learned about it in my high school economics class. When the thick envelope from Northeastern University arrived, offering me a partial scholarship to their business program, I was ecstatic. My father was not. "Business school," he had said, looking at the acceptance letter with a furrowed brow. "What's the point? You'll just get married and quit your job to raise children anyway. It's a waste of money." Despite his disapproval, I went. I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't, studied through countless late nights, and graduated with honors. Throughout those 4 years, my father's attitude never changed. He attended my graduation ceremony, but spent most of it talking about Michael's upcoming internship at a prestigious finance firm. After college, I was hired as an assistant at a local marketing agency. The pay was modest, but I was eager to get my foot in the door. For 3 years, I absorbed everything I could: digital strategies, content creation, analytics, client management. I stayed late, volunteered for difficult projects, and saved every penny, living in a tiny studio apartment with second-hand furniture. My dream was to eventually start my own agency, focusing on small businesses that couldn't afford the high fees charged by larger firms. At night, after my regular work hours, I built a portfolio by helping local shops with their social media presence for free, just to gain experience and references. None of this impressed my father. When I mentioned my plans at family dinners, he would sigh and change the subject, or worse, make dismissive comments about little hobby businesses, and playing on Facebook all day. My brothers, following his example, would smirk or roll their eyes. I still remember the night everything changed. It was my younger brother Michael's 21st birthday dinner. Mum had prepared his favorite dishes: herb-crusted rack of lamb, roasted rosemary potatoes, and homemade cheesecake. The entire extended family had gathered to celebrate, filling our dining room with noise and laughter. By then, I had finally taken the plunge and started my own small digital marketing business after saving every penny from 3 years of working as an assistant. I had exactly 3 clients: a local bakery, a small law firm, and a boutique clothing store. The income was barely enough to cover my business expenses and rent, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. Nobody in my family took it seriously. "So, what exactly do you do all day? Play on social media?" my cousin Jack asked with a smirk when I mentioned my business during a rare lull in the conversation about Michael's achievements. "It's digital marketing," I explained patiently, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. "I help small businesses build their online presence, create content strategies, and develop targeted advertising campaigns. For example, I just helped Miller's Bakery increase their online orders by 30% by—" "Sounds like a fancy way of saying you're unemployed," my uncle interrupted, and everyone laughed, including my brothers. My father didn't laugh, but the amused glint in his eyes was just as painful. I forced a smile and continued serving the cheesecake I had spent hours preparing that morning, carefully decorating each slice with fresh berries and mint leaves. Nobody had thanked me for it. Nobody even seemed to notice the intricate design I had created on top. As the evening progressed, my father started talking about Michael's future. "He's already got 3 job offers from top firms," he boasted, refilling his wine glass. "Morgan Stanley is particularly interested. That's what happens when you focus and work hard." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I had been working 16-hour days for months, building my client list, learning new platforms, perfecting my strategies, handling everything from client meetings to bookkeeping to actual content creation. But in my father's eyes, none of that counted as real work. When dinner was finally over, everyone remained seated, continuing their conversations about Michael's bright future and Mark's recent promotion. I started gathering the plates, stacking them carefully to avoid noise. "Can someone help Lisa with the dishes?" my mother asked timidly, glancing around the table. There was an uncomfortable silence. My brothers suddenly became engrossed in a conversation with our cousins. My aunts and uncles studied their wine glasses with newfound interest. My father's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Go wash dishes, useless!" he yelled, waving his hand dismissively in my direction. "That's all you're good for anyway." The table erupted in awkward laughter. A few family members had the decency to look uncomfortable. My brothers looked down at their plates. My mother's eyes filled with that familiar mixture of pity and resignation I had seen countless times before. I stood frozen, plates in hand, as 20 pairs of eyes watched for my reaction. The weight of years of dismissal, underestimation, and casual cruelty pressed down on me until I could hardly breathe. In that moment, something inside me broke, and something else hardened into steel. "Sure, Dad," I said quietly, walking to the kitchen with the stack of dirty plates. But as I stood at the sink, hot water running over my hands, watching the remnants of a celebration I had helped create but wasn't allowed to enjoy swirl down the drain, I made a decision. This would be the last time. The very last time I would let anyone, especially my family, treat me this way. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, I drove back to my small apartment. Instead of collapsing into bed as I usually did after these emotionally draining family events, I sat at my desk and worked until dawn. I refined my business plan, created detailed growth projections, and crafted personalized pitches for 10 potential clients I'd been researching for weeks. I also made another decision. I would no longer attend weekly family dinners. I would no longer be the unpaid household help. I would no longer seek my father's approval or acknowledgement. For the next month, I barely saw my family. I rented a small office space in downtown Hartford with the last of my savings, hired a virtual assistant to help with administrative tasks, and focused every waking moment on growing my business. I worked until midnight most days, slept on the office couch when necessary, and lived on coffee and determination. I stopped answering my father's calls, demanding I come home to help with household chores. I missed 2 Sunday dinners in a row, something I had never dared to do before. When my brothers texted asking where I was, I simply replied, "Working." When my mother called, concerned about my absence, I simply told her, "I'm building something important, Mom. I need space to do that." "Your father is upset," she said, her voice tinged with anxiety. "I'm sure he'll manage without someone to wash his dishes," I replied, surprising myself with my directness. The breakthrough came faster than I expected. One of the potential clients I had pitched, Sullivan's, a chain of high-end restaurants with 5 locations across the state but outdated marketing strategies, responded to my proposal. The owner, Eleanor Sullivan, a stern woman in her 50s with impeccable style and a reputation for being difficult to impress, agreed to meet with me. Our first meeting was scheduled for 30 minutes, but lasted 2 hours. Eleanor had built her business from a single diner 20 years ago into one of the most recognized restaurant brands in Connecticut. She was sharp, direct, and skeptical of my proposals, until I showed her the detailed analysis I had conducted of her current marketing strategy, complete with specific weaknesses and actionable solutions. "You've done your homework," she admitted, studying my presentation with narrowed eyes. "But implementation is where most consultants fail." "That's why I'm not just a consultant," I replied. "I'm a partner who will be directly involved in every aspect of the execution." She asked me to come back the following week with a more detailed plan. I spent every waking hour preparing, analyzing her competitors, identifying untapped market segments, and creating sample content that aligned with the Sullivan's brand but modernized it for younger demographics. By our third meeting, Eleanor's skepticism had transformed into cautious approval. "Your ideas are exactly what we need," she said, closing my presentation folder. "You understand both our traditional customers and the younger demographic we're failing to reach." The contract she offered was bigger than anything I had dared to imagine. Sullivan's would become my primary client, with a monthly retainer that was triple what I was making from all my other clients combined. It would require me to expand, to hire a team, to move into a real office. As I signed the contract with Eleanor watching, I thought of my father's words, "Useless." I wondered what he would say if he could see me now, finalizing a deal worth more than he made in 3 months. The day after signing the contract, I called my mother. "I'd like to come to dinner this Sunday," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, "and I'm bringing someone important, a business associate." "Of course, honey," my mother said, sounding surprised but pleased. "I'll make something special. Your father will be happy to see you. He's been asking where you've been." I doubted that very much. More likely, he had been complaining about the lack of help in the kitchen. "One more thing," I added before hanging up. "I won't be helping in the kitchen. We'll be discussing business." The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. I could almost see my mother's anxious expression, hear the thoughts racing through her mind about how my father would react to this declaration of independence. "I'll let your father know," she finally said. That Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house dressed in my best business attire, a tailored navy suit I had purchased with my first Sullivan's payment, paired with elegant heels and subtle gold jewelry. Beside me was Eleanor Sullivan herself, who had agreed to join me after I explained the situation. "You don't need to do this," I had told her when she offered. "It's just a family dinner." "Nonsense," she had replied with a knowing smile. "Sometimes business is personal. Besides, I'm curious to meet the family of my new marketing director." She had promoted me on the spot the day before, after I presented her with a comprehensive 6-month marketing plan that impressed even her skeptical executive chef. "Remember," I told Eleanor as we walked up the familiar concrete path to my parents' front door, "this isn't just a family dinner, this is a statement." "Trust me, dear," she replied, adjusting her designer glasses. "I understand family dynamics better than most. My own father didn't speak to me for 3 years after I opened my first restaurant instead of joining the family accounting firm. Just introduce me as your investor and let me do the rest." I took a deep breath and knocked on the door of the house where I had spent 25 years being useless. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Eleanor could hear it. The door opened and there stood my father, his expression changing from annoyance to confusion as he took in my appearance and the elegant woman beside me. "Hi, Dad," I said with a confidence I had never shown him before. "I'd like you to meet Eleanor Sullivan, owner of Sullivan's Restaurants and my newest client and investor." My father's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He stood frozen in the doorway, one hand still gripping the doorknob. Eleanor stepped forward and extended her hand, breaking his trance. He took it automatically, his usual commanding presence nowhere to be found. "Mr. Johnson, it's a pleasure," Eleanor said with the perfect balance of professionalism and warmth. "Your daughter has revolutionized our marketing strategy in just a few weeks. She's quite the business genius." My father's eyes darted between us, trying to process this new reality. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind as he attempted to reconcile the daughter he had dismissed as useless with the professional woman standing before him, being praised by a successful business owner. "Please, come in," my father finally managed to say, stepping aside with uncharacteristic awkwardness. As we entered the familiar living room, I saw my mother emerge from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Behind her, my brothers lounged on the couch, both looking up with mild curiosity that quickly transformed into surprise when they saw Eleanor. "Lisa!" my mother exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace me before turning to Eleanor with a nervous smile. "And you must be Lisa's business associate?" "Eleanor Sullivan," she replied, shaking my mother's hand firmly. "Owner of Sullivan's Restaurants. Your daughter is doing remarkable work for our company." My mother's face lit up with genuine pride, an expression I rarely saw directed at me. "That's wonderful. We've eaten at your downtown location several times. The food is excellent." "Mom, where should we sit?" I asked, deliberately avoiding any move toward the kitchen. "Eleanor and I have some business details to discuss before dinner." Of course," my mother said, gesturing to the living room. "Make yourselves comfortable. Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. Oh." As Eleanor and I settled on the sofa, my brothers reluctantly made room, shifting to the adjacent armchairs. My father remained standing, hovering awkwardly at the edge of the room, as if unsure of his role in this unfamiliar scenario. "You must be Mark and Michael," Eleanor said, addressing my brothers directly. "Lisa has mentioned you." This was a polite lie. I had barely spoken about my family to Eleanor beyond explaining why I wanted her to join me for dinner. But it had the desired effect. My brothers straightened up, suddenly interested in the conversation. "I'm Mark," my older brother said, extending his hand. "I work in financial services at Brookfield Asset Management." "And I'm Michael," added my younger brother. "I just started at Morgan Stanley's analyst program." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Impressive. The financial sector is challenging but rewarding. Lisa tells me you both graduated from Cornell?" Another polite fiction, but my brothers eagerly confirmed it, launching into details about their education and career prospects. I watched with quiet amazement as Eleanor skillfully engaged them in conversation, asking insightful questions about market trends and investment strategies that had them competing for her attention. My father, still standing, finally spoke up. "Eleanor, can I offer you a drink before dinner? Wine, perhaps?" "Sparkling water would be lovely, thank you," Eleanor replied without breaking her conversation with Michael about emerging markets. My father nodded and disappeared into the kitchen, a room I had rarely seen him enter, except to retrieve food that was already prepared and waiting for him. A minute later, he returned with a tray holding glasses of sparkling water for Eleanor and me, and beers for himself and my brothers. As he actually served us, I caught my mother watching from the kitchen doorway, her expression a mixture of disbelief and something that looked almost like satisfaction. The conversation continued, with Eleanor subtly but persistently steering it toward my contributions to her business. Lisa's social media campaign for our new menu launch exceeded all projections, she explained. We saw a 47% increase in weekend reservations at all 5 locations. My brothers exchanged glances. My father, now seated in his usual armchair, cleared his throat. I didn't realize digital marketing could have such tangible results. "Oh, it's more than just posting pictures online," Eleanor said, with just a hint of condescension that made me want to hug her. "Lisa has developed a comprehensive strategy that integrates all aspects of our brand communication. The ROI has been exceptional." Before my father could respond, my mother announced that dinner was ready. As we moved to the dining room, I noticed something unusual. The table was already fully set, with serving dishes in the center. Normally, I would have been called to help with these final preparations. "Everything looks wonderful, Mrs. Johnson," Eleanor said as we took our seats. "Please call me Margaret," my mother replied, beaming. "I hope you enjoy the meal." As we began passing dishes, I waited for the familiar command from my father, "Lisa, serve the salad," or "Lisa, fill the water glasses." But it never came. Instead, he served himself last, after ensuring everyone else had food on their plates. The conversation during dinner was unlike any I had experienced at that table. Instead of my brothers dominating with stories of their accomplishments while I silently served and cleared, Eleanor directed the discussion toward business strategies, marketing trends, and the restaurant industry, all areas where I could contribute meaningfully. Lisa's content strategy increased our online engagement by 215% in just 3 weeks, Eleanor explained as my mother served the main course. "We've had to hire additional staff to handle the reservations coming through the new system she implemented." My father cleared his throat. "That's quite impressive." "It's not just the technical aspects she excels at," Eleanor continued. "Lisa has an intuitive understanding of customer psychology. She predicted exactly how our clientele would respond to the rebranding of our signature dishes. Throughout dinner, I spoke confidently about my work, my plans for expansion, and the new office space I was leasing downtown. With each statement, I watched my father's perception of me visibly shift. His eyes, which had always held a dismissive glance when I spoke about my business, now showed something new, reassessment. My brothers, too, were seeing me in a new light. Michael actually asked me about my client acquisition strategy, while Mark inquired about my revenue projections, questions that assumed my business was legitimate, not just a hobby as they had previously characterized it. When dessert time came, my mother began to stand, but my father placed a hand on her arm. "Let me get it," he said, rising from his seat. It was the first time I had ever seen him offer to serve others at his own table. The dining room fell silent as he disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with a chocolate cake, store-bought, not homemade, and began cutting slices for everyone. "This looks delicious," Eleanor commented as he placed a slice in front of her. "It's from Marino's Bakery," my mother explained. "Lisa always loved their chocolate cake as a child." I was touched by this detail. I hadn't known my mother had specifically purchased my favorite cake for this dinner. As my father served each of us dessert, Eleanor's phone rang. "Excuse me, I need to take this," she said, checking the screen. "It's my operations manager." As Eleanor stepped away to take the call, my father sat back down, looking uncomfortable in the silence that followed. I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, as if seeing me for the first time. "Your suit is very professional," my mother said, breaking the tension. "Is it new?" "Yes," I replied. "I bought it last week for client meetings." "It suits you," she said with a small smile. "You look like a successful businesswoman." Coming from my mother, who'd always gently encouraged me to dress more femininely, this was significant progress. "More coffee?" she offered as Eleanor returned to the table. "I'd love some," Eleanor replied. "That was the chef at our downtown location. We're implementing some of Lisa's menu presentation ideas tonight. She suggested highlighting local ingredients, which is attracting a whole new demographic of farm-to-table enthusiasts." My father stood up again. "I'll get the coffee," he said. The look of shock on my brothers' faces almost made me laugh. In the 25 years of family dinners, my father had never once volunteered to serve anything. As he walked to the kitchen, my mother looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, surprise mingled with something like pride, but also a question. "How did you do this?" When my father returned with the coffee pot, he moved around the table, serving each of us. When he reached Eleanor, he poured her cup with careful attention. "Thank you," Eleanor said, barely glancing up from her conversation with my brother about his business courses. My father nodded and continued around the table. When he reached me, our eyes met as he poured my coffee. For a moment, I saw something in his expression I had never seen before. Uncertainty, perhaps, or even a flicker of respect. "Thank you, Dad," I said quietly. He nodded, a slight frown creasing his brow, as if he was struggling with unfamiliar thoughts. "You're welcome," he replied equally quietly. As he took his seat again, I noticed how the dynamic at the table had shifted. My brothers were listening to me explain my marketing approach, asking questions that indicated genuine interest rather than skepticism. My mother was watching me with unconcealed pride, and my father, the man who had dismissed my career, my ambitions, and my worth, was silent, observing this new family configuration with an expression that alternated between confusion and thoughtfulness. After coffee, Eleanor announced she needed to leave. "Early meeting tomorrow," she explained. "We're discussing the expansion strategy Lisa proposed for our New Haven location." "You're opening in New Haven?" Michael asked, clearly impressed. "If all goes according to Lisa's projections, yes," Eleanor replied. Her market analysis was extremely persuasive. As we stood by the door saying our goodbyes, Eleanor turned to my father. "You must be very proud of your daughter," she said, fixing him with a penetrating look. "In all my years in business, I've rarely encountered someone with such natural talent and work ethic." My father nodded stiffly. "Yes, we're very proud of Lisa." The words sounded foreign coming from him, and everyone in the room knew it. There was an awkward pause before Eleanor continued. "She mentioned she comes from a family that values hard work and determination," Eleanor added, fabricating yet another polite fiction. "I can see where she gets her drive." My father straightened slightly at this, grasping at the compliment. "We've always emphasized the importance of perseverance," he said, as if he'd been my biggest supporter all along. Eleanor smiled politely, but didn't validate this revisionist history. Instead, she turned to me. "I'll see you at the office tomorrow, Lisa. Don't forget we have the conference call with the marketing team at 9. I'll be there, I promised, walking her to her car. Once we were out of earshot, Eleanor chuckled. Your father is exactly as you described. Thank you for doing this, I said sincerely. You didn't have to. I remember what it's like to need that validation, she replied, her expression softening. Sometimes people need to see you through someone else's eyes before they can see you clearly. Besides, everything I said was true. You are exceptional at what you do. After Eleanor left, an awkward silence fell over the house. My brothers retreated to their rooms, and my mother busied herself in the kitchen. I was gathering my things to leave when my father approached me in the hallway. Your investor seems impressed with your work, he said, struggling to find the right words. She is, I replied simply, and so am I. He nodded, looking down at his hands that had never washed a dish or served a meal until tonight. I never expected you to succeed, I finished for him. To be valued, to be more than the family made. He flinched at my directness, but didn't deny it. For a long moment he was silent, and I could see him wrestling with concepts that had never troubled him before. The possibility that he had been wrong, that his dismissal of my abilities had been unfounded. I should get going, I said, not wanting to prolong the conversation. I have an early meeting tomorrow too. As I reached for the door, my father spoke again. Lisa, wait. I turned, expecting, I don't know what I expected. An apology, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement of how he had treated me. Instead, he asked, will you come to dinner next Sunday? Your mother misses having you here. It was typical of him to use my mother as a shield, to avoid admitting his own desire to reconnect. But beneath the awkward invitation, I sensed a genuine request, perhaps the closest thing to an olive branch he was capable of extending. I looked at him for a long moment, taking in the man who had shaped so much of my self-perception. He seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than the father whose judgment I had feared and craved for so many years. I can come to dinner, I finally said, but I won't be washing any dishes. The look on his face told me he understood. Not everything had changed with one dinner, but something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in my life, my father saw me as a person with value beyond what I could do for him. That's fair, he said simply. As I drove home that night, streetlights casting intermittent shadows across my face, I realized that success wasn't just about proving my worth to my family, it was about proving it to myself. For years, I had internalized my father's assessment of me as useless. Now I knew better. The next morning, I walked into my new office where 3 employees, 2 content creators, and a social media manager I had hired the previous week, were already busy at their desks. On my desk was a gift basket from Eleanor with a note. Brilliantly played. The best revenge is living well and making them serve you coffee. I smiled, placing the note in my desk drawer. Eleanor was right about the revenge part, but that wasn't what yesterday had been about. It was about boundaries, respect, and finally taking my place at the table, literally and figuratively. As I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, I felt lighter somehow, the weight of seeking my father's approval. An approval that had always been contingent on me, filling a role that diminished me, had finally lifted. I was building something valuable, something meaningful on my own terms. I picked up my phone and texted my mother. Thank you for the chocolate cake yesterday. It was perfect. Her reply came moments later. Your father spent an hour this morning learning how to use LinkedIn. He's looking up your company. I laughed out loud, startling my employees. The image of my father who still printed his emails to read them, struggling with social media just to see what I had built, was both amusing and touching. He might never fully understand me or my choices. He might never be the supportive father I had longed for. But for the first time, he was making an effort to see me, the real me, not just the daughter he had tried to mold into his narrow vision of womanhood. And that, I decided as I turned to my work, was enough of a beginning. The following Sunday arrived faster than I expected. This time, I drove to my parents' house alone, dressed casually but professionally in dark jeans and a silk blouse. No power suit needed today. I had already made my statement. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something different. My father's car wasn't in its usual spot. Instead, it was parked on the street, leaving the prime parking spot vacant. For me, I realized. My mother opened the door before I could knock, embracing me with unusual enthusiasm. "Lisa, come in, come in. Your brothers are already here." The house smelled different, not the usual roast chicken and potatoes my mother made every Sunday, but something more complex. Garlic, herbs, and wine mingled in the air. "Something smells amazing," I commented as I followed her to the living room. "Your father is trying a new recipe," she said with a mixture of pride and amusement. "He's been watching cooking shows all week." I stopped in my tracks. "Dad is cooking," she nodded, a small smile playing at her corners of her mouth. "He said it was time he learned. He's been in the kitchen since noon." In the living room, my brothers greeted me with an awkwardness that was new to our relationship. Mark actually stood when I entered, a courtesy he typically reserved for his boss or girlfriend. "Hey, Lisa," Michael said, offering me the comfortable armchair, my father's chair. "How's the Sullivan account going?" "It's going well," I replied, taking the offered seat with a strange sense of disorientation. "We're launching the New Haven location marketing campaign next month." "That's really impressive," Mark said, and the genuine admiration in his voice caught me off guard. "I mentioned your work to my team. We're actually considering upgrading our own digital strategy. Would you have time to look at our current approach?" Before I could answer, my father appeared in the doorway, wearing an apron I had never seen before. There was a smudge of flour on his cheek, and he looked uncharacteristically flustered. "Lisa, you're here," he said, wiping his hands on the apron. "Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes. Can I get you something to drink?" I stared at him, momentarily speechless. My father, the man who had never so much as poured his own glass of water when I was around, was offering to serve me. "Sparkling water would be nice," I finally managed. He nodded and disappeared back into the kitchen. I turned to my mother, raising an eyebrow in silent question. "He's been different all week," she whispered, leaning closer. "Helping with dishes, asking me about my day. Yesterday he even vacuumed the living room." My brothers exchanged glances. "We think Eleanor really got to him," Michael explained. "After you left last week, he was quiet for hours. Then he started asking us questions about what we thought of your business." "What did you tell him?" I asked. Mark shrugged. "The truth. That we were surprised but impressed. That maybe we'd underestimated you." My father returned with my sparkling water, served in one of the good crystal glasses usually reserved for special occasions. "Dinner's almost ready," he announced. "I hope everyone likes salmon." Dinner was a revelation. My father had prepared a full 3-course meal: butternut squash soup, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, and a lemon tart for dessert. It wasn't perfect. The soup was slightly under-seasoned, and the tart crust was a bit tough, but the effort behind it was unmistakable. More surprising than the food was the conversation. My father asked detailed questions about my business, how I structured my client agreements, how I measured campaign effectiveness, how I planned to scale. He listened to my answers with genuine interest, occasionally nodding or asking follow-up questions. When dinner was over, I automatically began to stand to clear the plates, then caught myself. Old habits died hard. "I've got it," my father said, rising from his chair. "Mark, Michael, would you help me clear the table?" My brothers, looking as shocked as I felt, stood and began gathering dishes. My mother squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes shining with unshed tears. As the men cleared the table, she leaned over to me. "I've waited 30 years to see this," she whispered. Later, as we all sat in the living room with coffee and the remains of the lemon tart, my father cleared his throat. "Lisa, I've been thinking," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your mother and I are considering renovating the kitchen. We thought maybe you could recommend someone who could help us build a website to showcase Margaret's recipes." I stared at him. This wasn't just an acknowledgement of my professional skills. It was an invitation into their lives in a new capacity, not as the dutiful daughter who served and cleaned, but as an expert whose opinion they valued. "I could do that," I said slowly. "Or I could teach you both how to do it yourselves, if you're interested." My father nodded, looking relieved. "We'd like that." As I drove home that night, I realized something important. The power dynamic in my family had fundamentally changed, but this wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about growth. My father was trying to evolve, to see beyond the rigid roles he had assigned to each of us. It wasn't a complete transformation, and years of dismissal couldn't be erased by one salmon dinner, but it was a beginning. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. My team was growing. I now had 5 employees, and we were interviewing for a 6th. Sullivan's campaign was exceeding all expectations, and word of mouth had brought us 3 new clients in the past week alone. I was reviewing applicant resumes when my phone rang. It was Eleanor. "How was family dinner?" "Round 2, she asked without preamble. I laughed. "Surreal. My father cooked." "Cooked? As in prepared food with his own hands? Salmon even. And he wants me to teach him and my mother how to build a website." Eleanor chuckled. "Remarkable what a shift in perspective can do. Which reminds me why I'm calling. We're hosting a business leadership gala next month. I'd like you to be my guest of honor. You can bring your family if you'd like." I thought about it for a moment. My father in a room full of successful business leaders, watching as I was recognized for my achievements. "I'll ask them," I said. "I think they might actually come." "Excellent. Oh, and Lisa? The board approved your proposal for the New Haven expansion. We're moving forward with the full marketing plan, including the budget increase you requested." After we hung up, I sat at my desk staring out the window at the Hartford skyline. 6 months ago, I had been an assistant with a dream. Now I was directing major marketing campaigns, leading a growing team, and perhaps most surprisingly, rebuilding my relationship with my family on new, more equal terms. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother and I are free Thursday evening if you have time to start our website lessons." I smiled and typed back, "Thursday works. I'll bring dinner." Some patterns were hard to break, but this time I'd be the one serving dinner not out of obligation, but out of choice. And that made all the difference. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of growth and change. My agency, which I had officially named Prism Digital, had expanded to 12 employees and moved to a larger office in downtown Hartford. The Sullivan's campaign had won a regional marketing award, bringing us attention from bigger potential clients. I had hired an operations manager to handle the day-to-day logistics, allowing me to focus on strategy and client relationships. My relationship with my family had evolved too, settling into a new pattern that still occasionally surprised me. Sunday dinners continued, but the responsibilities were now shared. Sometimes my mother cooked, sometimes my father, and sometimes we ordered takeout. I no longer automatically cleaned up afterward. Instead, we all pitched in together, even my brothers. The website my parents had created with my guidance was live, a simple but elegant platform showcasing my mother's recipes and my father's newfound interest in home renovation. It had started as a hobby, but they were beginning to attract a small following of empty nesters looking to reinvent their living spaces. Most surprising of all was my father's transformation. The change hadn't been immediate or complete. He still occasionally slipped into old patterns, assuming I would handle household tasks or dismissing my ideas. But now, when I called him out on these behaviors, he actually listened. Sometimes he even apologized. The day of Eleanor's business leadership gala arrived on a crisp autumn evening. I had invited my entire family, unsure if they would actually attend. To my surprise, they had all accepted. I met them at the entrance to the Grand Hotel where the event was being held. My mother looked elegant in a navy dress I had helped her shop for. My brothers were polished in their business suits. And my father looked simultaneously proud and nervous, adjusting his tie repeatedly as we walked into the ballroom. "There are so many important people here," he whispered, recognizing the mayor and several prominent business leaders. "Yes," I agreed. "And you're with one of them." He looked at me sharply, then his expression softened into something like wonder. "I suppose I am." Eleanor greeted us warmly, introducing my family to her board members and key investors. I watched my father's expression as they spoke to me with respect and admiration, consulting me on business matters and complimenting my innovative approaches. With each introduction, his chest puffed out a little more, his expression shifting from nervousness to pride. "Your daughter has revolutionized our entire approach to customer engagement," Eleanor told him during dinner. "The Sullivan's brand has never been stronger." "She always was determined," my father replied. "Even as a little girl, when she set her mind to something, there was no stopping her." I nearly choked on my water. This revisionist history was new, but I decided to let it pass. Perhaps in his own way, he was trying to create a new narrative for our relationship, one where he had always believed in me. After dinner, Eleanor called me to the stage to present me with an award for marketing excellence. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the room full of business leaders and entrepreneurs, my eyes found my family at their table. My mother was wiping away tears, my brothers were applauding enthusiastically, and my father was watching me with an expression I had spent my entire life longing to see, unmistakable pride. "I want to thank Eleanor Sullivan for taking a chance on a small agency with big ideas," I said into the microphone. "And I want to thank my family for teaching me persistence and resilience, qualities that have served me well in business." It wasn't exactly true, but it wasn't entirely false either. My father's dismissal had taught me to fight harder, to prove myself, to never give up. Perhaps not the lesson he intended, but valuable nonetheless. Later, as the event wound down, I found myself standing alone with my father near the bar. "Your speech was very kind," he said, studying his whiskey glass. "Especially considering you called me useless 3 months ago?" I finished for him. He winced. "I've been trying to understand why I did that," he said slowly. I think I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you wouldn't need us. That you would succeed on your own terms, not mine, and leave us behind." He looked up at me, his eyes troubled. "I was wrong, Lisa. About so many things. And I'm sorry." The apology I had waited decades to hear, delivered in a crowded hotel ballroom over the clink of glasses and murmur of conversation. I had imagined this moment so many times, pictured myself delivering a devastating response that would make him feel as small as he had made me feel. Instead, I simply said, "Thank you." He nodded, understanding that forgiveness would take time, that one apology couldn't erase years of dismissal. But it was a start. The following week brought another surprise. A major national restaurant chain had heard about my work with Sullivan's and wanted to discuss a potential contract, one that would require me to open a second office in Boston. As I considered the opportunity, I realized I needed to hire a deputy director to manage the Hartford office while I focused on expansion. I spent days reviewing internal candidates and external applicants, but none seemed quite right. Then, during Sunday dinner, an unexpected solution presented itself. "I'm retiring next month," my mother announced as she passed the salad. 30 years of teaching is enough." "What will you do with your time?" Michael asked. She shrugged. "The website is taking off. I might focus on that, or find something new." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. My mother had been a successful teacher before marriage, and children had shifted her focus. She was organized, detail-oriented, and excellent with people. She also had a business degree that she had never fully utilized. "Mom," I said slowly, "how would you feel about coming to work for me?" The table fell silent. My mother stared at me, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "What?" "I need a deputy director to run the Hartford office while I expand to Boston. Someone who's organized, good with people, and who I can trust completely. That's you." "But I don't know anything about digital marketing," she protested. "You can learn the technical aspects. What I need is someone who can manage the team and maintain client relationships. You have those skills already." My father, who had been silently watching this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "She'd be excellent," he said decisively. "Margaret has always been the most organized person I know." My mother looked between us, her expression a mixture of confusion and hope. "You really think I could do it?" "I know you could," I said, "and I'd be honored to work with you." 2 weeks later, my mother started training at Prism Digital. She absorbed information like a sponge, asking insightful questions and quickly grasping the fundamentals of our business model. The team respected her immediately, responding to her natural authority and genuine interest in their work. My father, meanwhile, threw himself into their website and home renovation projects. He started a YouTube channel documenting his transformation from clueless executive to handy husband, his words, which was gaining a modest but dedicated following. On the day we signed the contract with the national restaurant chain, I invited my parents to the office for the ceremony. As we posed for photos, the marketing director of the chain asked how long my mother had been with the company. "She's new," I explained, "but she's been teaching me all my life." My mother squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. Later, as we celebrated with champagne, my father pulled me aside. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "All those years I was so wrong." "Yes," I agreed. "You were. But you proved me wrong. You stood your ground and made me see you." I thought about the night at Michael's birthday dinner, when he had called me useless in front of the entire family. About the moment at the sink when something had broken inside me and something stronger had formed in its place. "Sometimes people can only see your worth when you refuse to accept their definition of you," I told him. He nodded slowly. "I'm trying to see better now." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm still here." And that was the truth. I hadn't stayed connected to my family out of obligation or habit, but because they were trying to grow, to see me clearly, to form new patterns of relationship based on mutual respect rather than rigid expectations. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Heard about the new contract? Dinner to celebrate? I know a great place where the servers never tell anyone to go wash dishes." I laughed and showed the message to my father. To my surprise, he laughed too. "I deserved that," he admitted, "and probably a lot worse." "You did," I agreed, "but I'd rather look forward than back." As we rejoined the celebration, I watched my mother chatting confidently with my team, already settling into her new role. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from the night I stood at the sink, hands in soapy water, making a decision that would change everything, to this moment of professional triumph and personal reconciliation. The best revenge wasn't making my father serve coffee or even hearing him apologize. It was creating a life so authentically mine that no one could dismiss it, least of all myself.